and CEO of Novavax. Stan, great to see you.
Thank you for inviting me.
So over the past 2 years, your team has been working on the development of this vaccine using a tried and true protein. Tell us what that means, Stan, and how is this more effective than Moderna and Pfizer's RNA version?
Well, I think it's an important advance. It's actually giving proteins as vaccines is tried and true in the sense that hepatitis and a variety of vaccines use that similar technology. Ours was a bit different, and so we have an innovative way of making the protein that makes it, we think, more effective and broader immune response to our vaccine. Everybody, all the pharma companies have tried to make a protein-based vaccine and have so far failed, and so this is the first one.
Well, I know this has been your passion, and you were not going to give up until you did it, and you did it. So if someone already has one dose of Moderna or Pfizer, can these be mixed, Stan?
Well, we have data that says they can be mixed, and we don't have approval for that yet, but that's in the process. The FDA has the data that we have for that, and also you said for 18 and above that we're expecting approval of adolescent use as well in the coming weeks. So there's a variety. It's a series of indications that will come over time, and we have it in other places in Europe and Australia and Canada and a variety of other places.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you about. You know, more than 175 countries have already approved Novavax. So here in the U.S., it just got the FDA stamp of approval. So what took so long?
Well, it's a great question. I don't have the complete answer to it, and we filed with the data with the FDA on December 31st, and the official package on January 31st. So FDA's got a long line of things to review and evaluate, and they also had to make sure that they had visited and approved our manufacturing site, one of which, and the main one of which, is in India at our partner Serum Institute, and they had to put together a team to go evaluate that, and they did, and they came back, and I think we passed with flying colors, as evidenced by the fact that the day after they came back from the inspection, they signed up an advisory committee team and put a date on it in June, and so that's what led to our ultimate approval yesterday.
And so in the U.S., 78% of Americans have received at least one dose, right? But there are still billions of people in.
We saw. Again, we're looking at a logarithmic scale. It's important for you to understand that. And you can see here that it's very important. This is something that they were looking at very early in the pandemic, is whether or not these vaccines were able to elicit a T-cell response. Because if you can elicit a T-cell response, then that means you can get much further and much more robust cell-mediated immunity. And you can see here that we had a very good, robust response with Moderna, also with the Pfizer vaccine, and really also with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well. And very happily with Novavax. So Novavax had a very good T-cell CD4 response as well. In fact, arguably it had one of the highest in terms of after 6 months. Again, we're looking here at 6 months. What is the T-cell response? What is the CD4 T-cell response after 6 months?
Fentanyl is killing over 200 Americans each and every day. Unfortunately, many Americans who've died from an overdose didn't even know that they were taking the deadliest drug our nation has ever seen.
They didn't know that the counterfeit pills and prescription drugs like Percocet, oxycodone, Xanax, or Adderall are being laced with fentanyl.
And illicit drugs like marijuana, heroin, and meth are being laced with fentanyl also.
Most of these people who bought these illegal drugs didn't know that drug traffickers are selling counterfeit pills that are nearly identical to legitimate prescription medicine. And they didn't know that just one pill can kill.
And they didn't know that a lethal dose of illicit fentanyl is equivalent to a few grains of salt, which can fit on the tip of a pencil.
As doctors in the Senate, we know that fentanyl is harming our communities, tearing apart families.
This epidemic is exploding. It's killing our fellow Americans at record rates.
Never take any drug except those personally prescribed by your physician and filled by your pharmacist.
The first spikes of COVID-19 in the wintertime starting in Finland and then finally ending up later in Greece at the bottom of Europe. And the question is could this be through vitamin D? Well, we know that vitamin D is associated with better outcomes in COVID-19, but we also know that there's some other things that are causing morbidity, specifically obesity, diabetes, and how is this related? How is this tied in? So let's go back to basics once again. We know that angiotensin 2 is converted into angiotensin 1-7. That's important to know because angiotensin 2 is a pro-oxidant. It causes oxidative stress in the cells, and it gets converted into something that does the opposite, which is angiotensin 1-7. And the thing that does that is the ACE2 protein, which also acts as a receptor for the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And that's important to understand because ACE2 is going to balance out the oxidative stress in your body. We know that because angiotensin 2 is a pro-oxidant and increases the risk of reactive oxygen species in the cell. Whereas angiotensin 1-7, red arrow, puts the brakes on reactive oxygen species. We don't like reactive oxygen species. These things lead to mitochondrial damage, oxidative stress, diabetes, dementia, these sorts of things. Obviously, when you have SARS-CoV-2 knocking out your ACE2 protein, which is causing this conversion, that is going to cause a major increase in reactive oxygen species. Not only that, but the infection is going to recruit white blood cells, which is also going to increase reactive oxygen species. And when you have increased reactive oxygen species, especially in the endothelial lining of your blood vessels, when those blood vessels get damaged, blood clots occur. And if those blood clots happen to be in the pulmonary vasculature, which is the blood clots that cause embolism, which is the blood clots that causes hypoxemia, which are the blood clots that get people on ventilators, this is potentially the issue what we see with COVID-19. How can we reduce the amount of reactive oxygen species? Well, we know that the pineal gland secretes melatonin. That happens at night. That is actually one way of dampening down reactive oxygen species. But there is another way we have discussed before that may reduce reactive oxygen species as well, and that is through near-infrared radiation coming from the sun. And 20 times the amount of melatonin is produced in the mitochondria, right where it's needed to deal with these reactive oxygen species and hopefully prevent blood clots and hypoxemia. Is it possible that sunlight and those places that have more sunlight may be beneficial at getting rid of blood clots and hypoxemia? Now, in case you think that this might be a far-fetched theory, there's actually some data behind this. This was a study that was published in December of 2021, and they looked at 60 patients, and they looked at measures of reactive oxygen species. And we've looked at this before, so let's go through it quickly. What they found was that intracellular glutathione was reduced as you get older, and reduced specifically if you got COVID. And so that would show not only COVID, but older age was associated with more reactive oxygen species. When they looked at oxidative stress particularly, again, what did they see? That as you get older, oxidative stress necessarily goes up, and that puts you at risk. But when you had COVID, it was higher in those patients. And finally, a measure of oxidative damage itself. Once again, that as you go older, there is more oxidative damage that is occurring, but at each one of these points, those that had COVID had more oxidative damage. So,